program, which I don't know if you guys have heard of. It's reducing emissions from forest degradation and deforestation. Basically, the idea is like communities that live on forests that could be deforested. If they agree not to deforest it, they're compensated for the avoided emissions. So the objective of this project was to take those NGOs who come up with, each has kind of their like geographic area. One focuses on Brazil, another on Peru. Export oriented. And one of the early things I got passed was a list of so I got the KMLs from our NGO team. I got shapefiles on kind of basic geographic information, and then shapefiles on indigenous lands from Funai. The quantitative data was from kind of a variety. The IBGE has a bunch of census stuff, ag information, stuff that happens with varying frequencies and whatnot. I have those asterisks because the data on the tribes from Funai isn't available publicly. I'll talk about that a little later, but there's a good reason for that. Yeah, so this is what I got. It's basic, it's just numbered and names, which is kind of like as simple as it gets. But they're just starting to do this kind of like wiki mapping, where people can go, anyone in the public can go on and plot points and then provide some contact information, and that funnels through to the relevant NGO to do follow-up. Basic database. So this is where I started thinking like, well, I can tie these together and make it a little bit more meaningful, and like obviously it's more complicated than putting together a little model and being like, oh well, this tribe's well suited to participate in the market because they hit these parameters. So this is just the processing it did. Eventually, we can make it into a model so that we can just be constantly updating when people are plotting points in that wiki format, or people from the NGO keep identifying. Anyways, yeah, convert the KMLs into a layer, add the shapefiles, some sorting because the rivers were everything down to the tiniest streams. You don't really want to display that. It's not super relevant. Breaking the roads into planned roads versus paved roads versus toll roads, get them all to the same layer, which is the South American data. There are a few other data sources for like the outlines of the states. Just formatting that so it encompasses the entire Amazon. Then finally joining the census data, creating the buffers around the candidate sites. Obviously, like 100 kilometers. Is there methodology behind that? Not really. It's just because what I want to do is capture eventually I identified just a few metrics that would be useful, at least not necessarily in like a predictive way, but at least to provide context to the decisions And that whole adage about you can't manage what you can't measure. So anyway, continue with that. This is kind of the map output, where you see kind of the sites and the buffers and kind of the stuff that's around them, different types of roads, major rivers, different land use types, and then just put together like a basic report template so that now we have kind of our GDP per capita of the nearest towns, the average, sum of all the people around them, and then different attributes on the roads. And so the next steps are just to keep adding different data items. So there's like ag production, see like how much cattle versus how much soy, whatever. Start to add primary source data. So actually interacting with the communities to find how many years have they been engaged in commercial activities, whatever. Qualitative data, so that'd be like rankings based on, from our experience having working with these people, to what degree. So integrated with the wiki, incorporating raster analysis. That'd be useful because you could actually understand, like, if a village wants to entertain the idea of producing agriculturally, well, how much land do they actually have? And using forest cover layers, I think you could, and soil maps, you can get some information on that. And refining the model. So some of the challenges were the data was in a lot of different places. It wasn't just IBG, like this one clearinghouse. They have like a cities page and a state page and like environmental data page. The metadata, like I said, leaves something to be desired. It's not always all so complete. The interface isn't great. The ID numbers were really frustrating. Sometimes they'd be like 7 digits in one format and 6 in another. And you'd have to merge on names. And that gets complicated because you have all the diacritical marks. You have just, in Portuguese, has many that they use. So there you probably have to export the data, format it in another program, and bring it back in. Indigenous data is not public. And then the data from the hinterland can be of suspect quality of source. You see that a lot. You see just suspiciously round numbers sometimes. Like the average yield is 2,000 kilograms on the nose. Like that doesn't happen. So some of the limitations are these economic indicators can be mixed or ambiguous. So you can think of that in the sense of like a road. Obviously, you build a road to a community, it gets it access on one hand, but then also introduces all these other confounding things that can be pulling in different directions. There's a lot more information out there than what's available on the web. That was what my trainer in the Peace Corps always used to call Google Unplugged, which is kind of corny, but I think there's a lot of truth to it.
Okay, explain that one a little bit more.
Let's go down and get primary data. That's actually, there's a world of information beyond what's on IBG.
On Google, okay.
Yeah.
Beyond
Oh, yes.
Google.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of unmeasurable and intangible stuff that drives what our objective is, which is to identify communities that are capable of participating in markets that go far beyond what you can just collect through surveying. And none of this reflects anything about demand, which obviously from an economic standpoint is pretty important. So that's that. Anybody have any questions?
Can you write your map?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is all of Brazil.
Now this is
The legal
well, and you
one.
see how some of the roads stop very abruptly. I noticed that, and that's because there's kind of two different definitions for the Amazônia Legal,
Yeah.
and I messed that up.
Well, and the roads, I mean, there's a lot. The roads layers are complicated, right? Because there's what's publicly available, and then there's also a lot of,
Informal.
yeah,
Yeah.
another whole thing.
Yeah. And then the planned roads are from just having like the backbone down the coast, and all of a sudden the whole country has fiber optic. And likewise, like this, they're just going to build this grid of roads through Accra. It's
planned.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of your candidates are not apparently within the indigenous territories. They're not all
Yes.
indigenous.
There's a handful of different designations for the lands. Everything from like federally recognized to just kind of like sustainable use areas, and that isn't all. It's not all reflected.
In this okay.
But it's useful. I think it's a useful start. And especially to get, from like an organizational standpoint, to have it from the get-go, to have like the architecture. It'll just, though the benefits aren't immediately obvious, it's a 5-year project, and further down the line, there's a possibility to learn looking backwards, but also having future decision making.
Yeah, and figuring out what's feasible in terms of data quality, data access, all those things.
Yeah, this would be a very different exercise in Peru.
Yeah.
Be a lot more. Yeah, so I think they have a lot. Well, so it depends, because I went to meet with people, and there's states that have pretty substantial royalties from natural gas or mining, and typically they have pretty good GIS, and then other places it's like down to parcel data. It looks similar to kind of the U.S. system, but I imagine it's a little bit patchwork. You don't have a lot of like interoperability.
Good start.
Yeah.
Anybody have questions? No, you have to use the keyboard. Yeah, I think maybe you're a little higher might be better. I don't know, just having her. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, so I'm going to be using my laptop because we've got a lot of information to cover, and I think you guys are thoroughly going to enjoy this. So we're going to be taking a systems perspective. And what we're looking at is the region. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with dashboards. You should be. It's a lot of different agencies use them, businesses use them, and it's a way for stakeholders to kind of monitor what's going on. For example, in Chicago, they have like a freight mobility dashboard where you can see areas of historical congestion, and businesses can plan based on looking at that. What do we need to work on so we can improve the capital flow? So the system that we're going to be looking at is a regional system right there. You can see it. It's called the Central Lina region, and the agency that's responsible, along with a lot of other stakeholders for this region, is the Central Lina Council of Governments. And that American blob you see right there is the urban area of the greater Charlotte area, which I think the population density is a little over 2,000 per square mile in the urban area. So what counties are we looking at? We're looking at Anson, Cabarrus, Gaston, Iredell, Lincoln, Mecklenburg, Rowan, Stanley, and Union. And so what does a regional plan do? Regional planning agency is mostly, if you break down their responsibilities, it's procuring funding for projects, engaging the public and other stakeholders in the preliminary stages of project development, coordinating technical support for local entities during project implementation. This can be something as simple as like a workbook to understand ways of like avoiding polluting water sources when doing projects. Collecting and managing data in a transparent way that can be accessed by all stakeholders. And that's where you have the role of dashboards coming in. So the broader scope and introduction of this, we've got the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, which is really the reason for all of this regulation. One of the regulations in that is National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Are you guys familiar with that? Okay, so there are the gases that are regulated by the NAQS are carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, ozone, particle pollution, and sulfur dioxide. The regulations have actually had a higher return on investment. There's a lot of pushback when they started putting this. They're realizing there's a lot of gains by having these regulations. And it's also developing little niche markets like climate disclosure programs. And so some of the stuff that's going on, you know, why is this expensive? And one of the things you can look at is polluting is becoming increasingly more expensive. There's a litigation battle right now between North Carolina and Alcoa Power Generating. It was aluminum smelter, which falls into the particular emissions facilities that I looked at during my investigation. And they had dam rights, and now they're petitioning to get their license back so that they can rerun that dam for electricity generation. But they had moved to Iceland and let their license expire, not thinking much of it. Now they're trying to get it back. So that's expensive for the states as well. And resources, instead of these battles over, you know, that revolve around pollution, there's better ways to use that money than fighting in litigation. Now, that's not to say that there's a lot of good things that come out of those situations, but they're expensive. And there's a better way to do these. And a lot of that has to do with transparency and inclusiveness and dashboard monitoring. And also North Carolina has a renewable energy portfolio standard, and their target is 10% utilities. Their renewable portfolio for utilities has to equal 10% of the retail sales of the state of North Carolina in 2018. So, not as high as a lot of other states, but at the same time we have some things that we have in our advantage, which is, you know, we're not particularly huge like California. So in lieu of the regulation and expensive litigation, our REPS, it becomes increasingly apparent for the need of emissions task force, interagency, public, and private collaboration to mitigate pollution. So who are the stakeholders? We talked about Central Carolina Council of Governments, the greater community. In this particular instance, because we looked at the emissions facilities, we're looking at mostly, this isn't all of them, but mostly airports, industrial manufacturing, rail yards, industrial maintenance, and utilities. Alright, so my methodologies. And I'm just going to, as I talk about my methodologies, I'm going to go through, I have 4 maps. I looked at 4 specific emissions that are regulated, and I'll talk about those as I go through. So most of my data was, a lot of my data was obtained, primary data for the map was obtained through the EPA emissions data. And they have a thing where you can go to a facility type and then pick the state you want to look at, and it'll generate, and you can compare gases that they offer. They didn't offer carbon monoxide, and instead of nitrogen dioxide, they have NOx, nitrogen oxide. They use it almost synonymously sometimes at the EPA, so that's why it'll look different on the maps, but So what they do is they'll create a CSV file, which you can then take, the lat longe and throw it into the YX and get your points. So that's what I did, and how they're doing that is emissions calculations. Usually it's your activity data times your emission factor times your global warming potential, which is the relative measure of how much heat a gas traps in the atmosphere. And that calculation is used in upstream and downstream. And what that means is all the things that are contributing the gas that you're looking at, the emission that you're looking at, upstream coming into that, the equipment, the raw materials, to do the maintenance or whatever it may be, to supply the gas for combustion. And then you have downstream. And I don't know particularly what NAAQS looks at as far as upstream and downstream. I know they're not all regulated, but I know that some come in and play into their calculations. So the downstream would be like from utilities would be like the chain from, say, electricity generation to your end user, your household. And so let's just walk through these. So this is nitrogen oxide. Like I said, it's kind of used synonymously like with nitrogen dioxide. And a lot of our major contributors, and you'll see this pretty consistently, is Gaston and Rowan, right? Which is sort of a good thing because we pushed away these utilities and airports or tried to condense them. Right here you have Charlotte International, and then you have some huge utilities companies, but they're kind of set aside from where most of your urban areas are, and I think that's good for health benefits. But you have to look at your downstream emissions because you're going to have to be transporting that power, or those services, or those products. This is your PM10. The NAAQS looks at PM 2.5 and PM10. For time reasons, I use just PM10 to look at the breakdown.
What is PM10?
Particulate matter? Yeah, particulate matter 10. And it's also PM 2.5. I noticed that sometimes it's emitted in very small levels with a lot of these facilities. So that was another reason why I didn't pull PM 2.5. Here's your sulfur dioxide. Again, you see, your major contributors, Gaston, Rowan. And then you'll notice with this one, there seems to be a big difference between, you have just a few major emitters, and then it just seems like it's more spread out with the smallest level there, which goes up to 465 tons per year. Alright, now we have our VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And this is a little bit different. When we go through, I don't know if you guys were noticing at the top, it was kind of showing facilities where there are the major emitters. With this one, it's changed up a little bit. In the past, we'd see a lot of airports, utilities, but now you're getting aluminum manufacturing, construction materials, decorated products, and disposable packaging. And it's a little bit more spread out, and you have a few more major emitters involved. So this is my findings, and this is how I calculate it. Pretty simple. And what this metric could be used for is to understand. Now I know that the power is generated in another county and used. It's the power shared, created and shared. But the usefulness of this is understanding that pollution and how it relates to your population. As your population grows and your pollution increases, or is your population growing and then your metric not, if you're getting less pounds per capita but your population is growing, then you know that efficiency levels are increasing or that a regulation is increasing. And this is a good way for stakeholders to be, there's so much going on in regional planning that to have these simplified visual data representations showing, just a simple metric like this one helps stakeholders understand where they're at and gives them a benchmark for moving into the future. So let's talk about risk a little bit. In 1990 alone, so pollution reductions under the Clean Air Act prevented 205,000 early deaths, 10.4 million lost IQ points in children due to lead exposure, and that was from the EPA. And so that's about 0.08% of the population of that here. And when you look at that in terms of the value of statistical life, are you guys familiar with that term? So the EPA estimated that the value of statistical life is about $4.2 million. So that's the mean of it. So you're worth about $4.2 million towards the overall economy throughout your lifetime. And you break that down to a VSL per year, and that's about $182,000. That's the mean value of statistical life per year. So if you take the population of the Central Ina region, this is a real rough estimate, population of the Central Ina region, which is right around 2 million, and then you multiply that by your percentage of value of statistical life per year times the percentage of people who would have, based on the 1990 percentage, sorry, I'm explaining this a little bit not well, but so you take the percentage of people saved by the Clean Air Act, right? And then you find your population of the Central Ina region, and then you can use that information as a rough estimate of how many people would have been, how many premature deaths would have been prevented in the Central Ina region. Just a rough estimate. So when we do that, what we're finding is, and you can approach this as like a discontinuity, like they're preventing discontinuities. By preventing those early deaths, they're keeping money in the system, in the economy, in the regional economy. So if you look at that and apply it to Central Ina, you're getting about, on a conservative estimate, you're getting about 96 million retained due to the Clean Air Act and these emission standards, based on the 1990 estimates. So funding.
$96 million is the dollar units?
Yes, dollars. And I have the information right here if you want to look at it.
And it was just a fascinating thing to think about.
Yeah, and there's so much going into that, I couldn't explain to you how they got value of statistical life. It's really complicated, but yeah, so.
It's almost like it'd be easier if you thought about it in particular, like healthcare costs for problems associated with poor air quality, or
I think that's part of it.
Yeah, those would be almost easier to conceptualize than like whatever this VOS statistic is.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for the feedback. So funding, so the population is estimated to grow by 50% in 20 years, and so with the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act, they're going to continue to be renewed. And precedents and regulations as litigation happens and spills happen, pollution occurs, they're going to continue to be established, and capital investments from the state and the federal government are going to flow towards areas of lower risk. And so if you're having a lot of polluting, you're not avoiding those discontinuities, and the one we looked at was the value of statistical life. But there's a bunch of other ones that you're negating that will come back and then make it a poor investment. And that's one of the reasons we need dashboards, is it so everybody can be on board. There can be a simple data representation that can be accessed in real time, and you can see what's going on in the area, and that allows different entities to be able to react to those situations, or at least gauge where they are in terms of what they need to do to keep risk mitigated. So our conclusions. Let's see. Major emissions, like I said, coming out of Gaston and Rowan. And it's important. Okay, we already covered that. And so the major emitters in the regions that are experiencing the most emissions: Duke Power, Norndal USA, Daimler Trucks, Carolina State Light Company. And those companies have an opportunity here to work with CCOG and program developers and other stakeholders to create a dashboard, interactive emissions dashboard. I strongly suggest you look at Chicago's. They're just in terms of GIS mapping, like I've never seen anything like it, aesthetically and informationally. It's yeah, you should look at it. But they're doing that, and they're getting a lot of engagement from the public, and they're getting programs moving forward within their community, and I think a lot of it has to do with that transparency and the efficiency. If you're not, the reality is, if you're not being efficient and you're not keeping people informed, you're not going to engage them, you know. And I think that sounds really simple, but how often do we really overlook that? You know, they're like, why aren't people voting? Because you're not engaging them in the right ways. You're being inefficient. You're going to lose engagement. And so that's basically, and that'll cost you about 82 grand is what Chicago put into it, and now it can be run internally, because during that process of programming and developing it, the people that worked for the planning agency learned the software, learned how to deal with it, and it's in an interface where it can just be updated in real time now. And that's what we need. If Charlotte's going to be competitive in the next 30 years, they need to, their regional planning agencies need to step it up. Their GIS mapping is horrible. The my GIS maps are cooler than their GIS maps that they have on their website. And the data, now there's other data sources for North Carolina where you can use them. They're being very active in compiling that, but their regional planning agency isn't, and they're wondering why they're losing engagement, and it seems pretty apparent to me. But that's all I got. Thank you.
A lot of information right to us, really.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's good. It's good. So where, I think the one thing is dashboard a GIS? Is it a spatially explicit thing?
Yes, I should have pulled up an example of like a regional planning dashboard.
Yeah.
And like, so with Chicago's is they have a lot of them. They have like livability, so it shows like proximity to frequented sites based on your transportation options. Mm-hmm. So people can use that information, and you know that if the distance you have to walk from your transit to frequented sites, you know that your land use is being effective because you're moving frequented sites more towards closer to your transit options. Or freight mobility, like I talked about. You can see, kind of like similar to how I had the region singled out, they have their Chicago metro area that they're responsible for singled out, and it's very aesthetically done, and you can monitor. They have like real-time monitoring of like your freight lines, and they show you where congestion's occurring. And then
in freight.
And I would say that as far as these little metrics that they have that accompany visual data representations and GIS, I would say that they have about 10 to 15 of those visual data representations. And I mean, I kind of want to pull up Chicago's thing real quick.
I'm super curious.
Okay.
I think you're writing yourself a job. You should get it out of.
I'm trying to get an internship with these people.
Well, there you go. He is writing himself a job. I'm understanding the motivation of all of these projects, Mark. You should use it. Develop some skills that everybody needs. That you also enjoy doing. That's the key. You must enjoy doing them.
What is enjoying?
You won't mind getting up and going to your work every day. That's a good.
So yeah, they, as you can see, it's like they've taken, when you compare, and what you have to think about is that regional planning agencies are competing for funding. At the federal level, Central Iowa is competing with Chicago. At the state level, Central Iowa is competing with one of the other regional entities within the state. And it's competitive. When you have Chicago doing this, and then Central Iowa just having like a black outline area of the region that's labeled, and that's their like, hey, this is who we are. It's like, your federal, the federal entities are going to be like, here you go, Chicago. Like,
so they're competing for what? For funds, for grants, and
yes, yeah, a lot. It's very grant based, and you can take a lot of those grants at the regional level and throw them into place-based investment strategies, like closing the availability of farmers markets or grocery stores to lower food insecurity. So, like,
how much do you think that page got?
Well, he said $89,000, right?
Yeah, 82. That's what on their, because they showed. They're very transparent too, being like, this is who made it, this is how much it cost. So this is one example of the map that they're creating. And I think it's every 10 day after this. So when you're thinking about logistics as, business, it's good to have this information. If anything, I think it gives you a sense that the people are moving in the right direction and trying to do their job as a planning agency. And so when you work with them, you're going to be more trustworthy, and you're gonna respect them more as a business when you're like, okay, they're providing me with useful information, therefore I want to work with them. Establish this relationship. Let's see. I haven't looked at all of these, but let's see forward. What we got here? We have like an innovate. Let's see what. Okay, that's transit access. So.
But like air pollution would be something that you were focusing on.
Mine would be air pollution, and I'm thinking like more, you'd have to develop software around it, but I'm thinking like you look at a source, big source, you click on it, and then you can see how much it's emitting, what business it is, what's the pounds per capita, the emissions in pounds per capita based on the pollution source. And you could see, you'd be able to compare population growth with industrial manufacturing emissions. And those things are like very closely linked. The more population tends to have more industrial emissions, right? Because they need to supply more power, they have more machinery, they have more projects they have to create. So if you know that ratio is going down or staying the same as population grows by 50% in 20 years, you can have a benchmark to understand less pollution is going into the air. And we already talked about just one specific benefit of that, and that's the health benefits at the very broad level.
It's a great, like setting up a real system for accountability for.
That's the main, and at the same time, private entities are doing CDP, climate disclosure programs, something that's very interesting. And so if you have both of these groups working together as like businesses, Duke Power's probably, I'm sure they've got something that resembles a climate disclosure program, I'm sure. I should look more into it. But if you have them doing climate disclosure, and that's at the CO2 usually, CDP, but if you have them doing CO2 and then counties or regional agencies tracking emissions at the systems level, that's when you start really understanding where are the problems going to arise and how can we prevent that. And that's just good practice for a good regional economy. So.
You guys have any
told you.
Great. Alright.
I don't get an applause.
You already got one. Yeah.
Get out of there. You're done.
Well, you guys have like run the gamut on types of projects you did for this. This is really good. Really impressed. You guys see all the world of application of GIS, of all of your newly found or newly polished skills. You don't see them, alright?
Not
Yeah.
a whip.
Make some Baptists angry in your hometown. Political fodder. Okay, you know what? It is 11:50. We have lab coming up. You guys like your early lunch. Why don't we break? We'll come back at 12:07 to be precise, and we'll go through the raster lecture, and then we'll start the lab. So you'll just kind of carry on through. Okay. Excuse me, there's free ice cream at the quad at 12. At the quad at 12. So you can come back at 12:10.
yeah.
I'm just saying.
I'm not saying that like that's a priority for
You know, we could get some extra minutes.
We just might be ornery if we miss it.
You'd have to bring me some ice cream. I like chocolate ice cream.